In the 1960s, when the towers went up, they were revolutionary.
A project of this size created enormous challenges.
The problem with skyscrapers before then was that they were crowded by a grid of steel columns to keep them up. The Trade Center would be different. All columns would be shifted to a central core with the elevators and stairs, and to the building's outer skin.
Those were structural members. They actually held up about half of the weight of the building.
The outer columns were made from prefab steel pieces, lifted into place and bolted together. 59 columns on each side, 283 columns in all, reaching 1,360 feet into the sky. The floors were concrete, held up by steel trusses underneath. They linked the outer skin to the inner core. So the towers were spacious inside and sturdy on the outside.
From a structural engineering perspective, those buildings were magnificent.
Had there been more supporting beams in a greater area around this building?
Well, frankly, it's hard to imagine a building having more steel than this structure.
The innovative design was like a square donut. The strength was in the steel columns of the outer walls and the steel of the central core.
To accomplish this, each tower had 4 basic components.
First, you have a traditional core. These are the columns in the core and the columns rising about 110 floors high. There are 47 such columns on the inside.
And what made this structure so technically innovative was its steel perimeter tube.
This is a series of massive columns that goes up all the way high in the building, ringed by very deep spandrel beams.
It's like a box, and the box can be very, very tall. And it was very clear from looking at the building that you could see that strength.
Each tower was topped by a hat truss, a set of steel braces that provided additional connections among the core columns and between the core and perimeter columns.
The purpose of the hat truss is twofold. It was to minimize the sway of the building in case of very strong winds, including hurricanes, but also to act as a supporting structure that would carry the television antenna that was at the top of WTC-1. Beyond that, you had the slabs.
The floor slabs consisted of 4-inch thick concrete on a steel deck, supported by a grid of steel bar trusses that connected to the perimeter tube. It was its unique design that made the World Trade Center such an extraordinary load-carrying structure.
These buildings had a great deal of redundancy.
In fact, the World Trade Center's original engineers had even done calculations to see what would happen if a Boeing 707, a slightly smaller aircraft than the 767s involved in 9/11, struck the building by accident.
And they concluded that if an aircraft hit, that the buildings would not collapse, that they would be able to take that hit and stand up.
We had designed the project for the impact of our largest airplane of its time, the Boeing 707. That is to take this jet airplane, run it into the building, destroy a lot of structure, and still have it stand up.
Well, 13,000 tons is a lot of force. People always talk about an airplane crashing into a building. And in 1944 or 45, a plane did crash into the Empire State Building. But the largest aircraft flying today, at least commercially, the 747, fully loaded, is on the order of 300 tons. So if you think about a 300-ton element crashing into a building that's been designed to carry 13,000 tons, you can see that an aircraft crashing into the World Trade Center would probably not do anything to the major building. It could affect localized structural elements, could knock out a column, and there could be some damage. But as far as a plane knocking a building over of that type, that would not happen.
The building was designed to have a fully loaded 707 crash into it. That was the largest plane at the time. I believe that the building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners because this structure is like the mosquito netting on your screen door. this intense grid, and the jet plane is just a pencil puncturing that screen netting. It really does nothing to the screen netting.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th, malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
The information that the Central Intelligence Agency has obtained by questioning men like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has provided valuable information and has helped disrupt terrorist plots, including strikes within the United States. He told us the operatives have been instructed to ensure that the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping. That the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping. The information that the Central Intelligence Agency has obtained by questioning men like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the self-confessed mastermind behind the 9/11 bombings that shocked the world. Nearly 3,000 people killed in one afternoon, an attack that still scars many lives today, and bombings that shock the world.
Instructed to ensure that the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping. That the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping.